Okay, so I'm going to start off by acknowledging the elephant in the room. There are already a lot of videos discussing this series, so I'm just adding to the pile. This anime trended on Twitter every week while it was airing. It's still on the top of my anime list at the time of writing, and I'm still seeing memes every day. But the important thing to understand is, I don't care. Jokes aside, I was conscious of discussing this show when everyone else had already done so. I didn't want to be seen as just hopping onto trends even when it's way too late. So my idea was to hold off on my thoughts until a potential second season comes around. That way it'll be topical again. But I just decided, f it, I do have thoughts on this anime, so I decided I might as well put my thoughts out there. I'm going to be running through what was covered in the anime. I have read ahead of it in the manga, but I won't be going ahead with that in this video. So with that said, let's go. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is a manga series written by Kanehito Yamada and illustrated by Tsukasa Abe, beginning its run in April 2020. The original run for Frieren was a comedy manga about an elven mage who went around murdering monsters in a dramatic fashion. Over time, the concept was reworked into a drama. Frieren spent 10 years travelling with the party of heroes. This included Himmel the hero, an egotistical but pure-hearted hero and leader of the group, Heiter the alcoholic priest, and the dwarven warrior Eisen. You know, typical RPG stuff. The gang return from their journey and are given a warm welcome. While watching the meteor shower, the gang discuss what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. Frieren plans to travel and learn new spells, but she promises to return in 50 years so that the group can get a better view of the next meteor shower when it occurs again in 50 years. Frieren then spends the next 50 years travelling all by herself, practicing her magic and collecting grimoires. She travels back to the village after 50 years, and to her nothing has changed. The truth is, things have changed. Quite a lot, actually. Elves have a longer lifespan than humans, so while not much time has passed from Frieren's point of view, it has been a whole lifetime for the rest of the party. Heiter has very visibly aged. Eisen hasn't aged quite as obviously, but we later learn that he has grown frail. But the passage of time has been most obvious when Frieren sees Himmel. The once youthful hero has now lost his hair and is an elderly man. As promised, Frieren takes the party to see the meteor shower. The journey is a tough one though for everyone except Frieren, but they eventually make it. The rest of the party attend Himmel's funeral. As this was the hero that went on a 10-year journey to defeat the Demon King, the funeral is a major event and is attended by a large number of people. The rest of the party overhear some of the other attendees saying that Frieren has been very cold, not showing any emotion. The time Frieren spent travelling with the rest of the party was just a drop in the bucket for her after all. It is when Himmel is being lowered into the ground that Frieren breaks down and begins to cry. She regrets not being able to know Himmel better. Of course, the time was relatively short from Frieren's point of view, but for the other party members it was a significant portion of their lives. Frieren's perception of time means that her ability to relate to others is completely different than others. There's also her personality though, of course. Not to say that she's cold or that she doesn't care for others, but she definitely isn't the emotional type, and fails to see why others care about certain things that she perceives as being trivial or unexciting. There were many times during their journey together that Frieren was shocked by Himmel's insight and his ability to find meaning in all the little things. After Himmel's funeral, Heiter suffers from death anxiety, and so he asks for Frieren's help in translating an ancient grimoire to extend his life. He also asks her to take on Fern, a war orphan that Heiter saved from suicide, as an apprentice. Frieren refuses this, but as a compromise, she agrees to teach her magic, because Fern shows great potential as a mage. Frieren stays around for a few years teaching Fern magic, but the grimoire actually didn't contain anything about extending life. Heiter asks Frieren to take Fern and leave, as he doesn't want Fern to have to lose someone again. Frieren says it's better to give Fern a proper goodbye, so the two stay until Heiter eventually passes on. Frieren travels with Fern for several years without any clear direction or meaning, collecting grimoires as they go. She has no particular goal in mind. After all, from Frieren's point of view, this is just her hobby. In my opinion, she doesn't even sound particularly enthused. Fern struggles to understand why Frieren cares about mundane tasks, such as finding one particular type of flower to decorate Himmel's grave. Okay, so this is interesting and it says a lot about Frieren's character. As we've seen in her interactions with her former party members, and as we'll see with other elves, but I'll come back to that, Frieren doesn't care for most of these little sentimental things that other humans care about. She just doesn't get it. The name Frieren means to be cold in German, fun fact. Either way, our trio are now heading on a journey, essentially revisiting everywhere that Frieren passed on her journey with the hero's party 80 years prior. For Frieren, this is no big deal. For Fern and Stark, this is going to take up a large portion of their lives. Going on this journey really speaks to how much Frieren has changed in a fairly short period of time. She went from being apathetic, not really caring about anyone or anything, to opening up, but after losing two people close to her. Along the way, the gang make a few stops and fulfill some obligations that Frieren had made years prior when she was travelling with the hero's party. After a run-in with Aura, they decide to go to Arrest to get first-class mage certification that they'll need to pass through the Northern Lands. But before doing this, they pass through the village of the Sword.
お待ちしておりました、フリーレン様。
君が今の里尾さん、若いね。
はい、49代目です。世襲なもので。
The resting place of the legendary hero sword. Fern and Stark are shocked to learn that Himmel actually didn't manage to pull out the hero sword. Despite not being able to do this, Himmel remains strong and determined, and insists that he'll be able to defeat the Demon King even without the legendary blade. Something I noticed is that Frieren actually doesn't enjoy the same status as the legendary hero. When others point out that Frieren reminds them of the elven mage that travelled with the hero's party, Frieren doesn't correct them most of the time. When Frieren does introduce herself as that mage, she usually does so in a fairly subtle way. She doesn't really care about fame or accolades. Frieren rescues a priest named Sign from a swamp. Sign's brother reveals that he is skilled when it comes to healing magic, and so Sign heals Stark after he is bitten by a snake. Over the course of episode 13, we learn a lot about Sign. As a child, he dreamed of becoming an adventurer, but eventually lost interest, leading him to turning down an offer from his friend to go travelling together. Frieren takes an interest in Sign and sees a lot of herself in him. Frieren herself was fairly apathetic to the idea of travelling with the hero's party, but by doing so, she learned a lot and gained a deeper appreciation of life, even if she didn't fully know it at the time. Frieren tries to get Sign to join her party. But Sign shows no interest, even though it's clear that, at least on some level, he regrets not going with his friend 10 years before. Eventually, he opens up and admits that the reason he didn't go before was out of respect for his brother, who turned down an offer from Hyter to be a priest at the Holy City, so that Sign wouldn't have to leave his home village behind. His brother slaps him and tells him that he doesn't regret his decision, but that Sign clearly does. With all this said, Sign agrees to go with Frieren and company, at least until he can find out where his friend went. Like many elves, Frieren was fairly apathetic throughout most of her life. As I said before, she was hesitant to join the hero's party and is confused about why Himmel has such a zest for life. Something did change in her during the journey, however, even if she wasn't fully aware of it. When Frieren trained under Flam, she learned about magic only through the lens of being a combat tool. She even learns to suppress her mana, a technique that is considered taboo even among demons. When travelling with the hero's party, Himmel and the party show a genuine interest in Frieren's magic in all its forms. As a child, Frieren cheered up a crying Himmel by showing him her spell to create a bed of flowers. During their journey, Himmel and the party show an interest in magic, and Frieren impresses them with her spells. When the quest is finished, however, Frieren does gain a deeper appreciation of magic, collecting grimoires as a hobby. We get the impression that Frieren opened up somewhat in the years after the party's quest. She cares deeply for her friends though, In episode 3, Fern follows Frieren in secret as she walks around town, looking at jewellery and asking about places to get dessert. Fern is initially disgusted, but as she later learns, Frieren was looking for both of these as a surprise for Fern's birthday. In fact, Frieren has a deeper appreciation of magic than Fern. While Fern was clear as a child that she didn't dislike magic, she just happened to choose magic as the area that she would specialise in. Fern does display a certain apathy, similar to Frieren, and she has clearly suffered being a war orphan. She is aware of the limited time she has to live, however. There are multiple times where Fern has to stop Frieren for spending ridiculous amounts of time in one village or doing one thing. As I mentioned earlier, Sign is similar to Frieren in a lot of ways. He's apathetic and spends his days drinking, smoking, and just kind of going through the motions. It's clear that, at least on some level, Sign regrets not going and travelling with his friend 10 years prior. Frieren encourages him to take that first step, however, and he does end up following Frieren, Fern and Stark, even if the time he spends with the party is ultimately short. The opposite of this would be someone like Kraft. As the party learn later, Kraft was a warrior and he travelled with the guerrilla warrior, Sign's friend. When their journey was over, Kraft found comfort in the robe and so he became a priest. A lot of characters in this anime have to deal with regret. Another example of this is Orden, the noble from the city of Vorik, who, after meeting Stark, convinces the party to have Stark pose as his son Wirt at the upcoming soiree, so the family can hide the fact that the son went missing. In a flashback, we see the argument between Orden and Wirt, leading the son to leave. After the soiree, Orden does offer to let Stark stay, but Stark points out that he can't be a replacement for Wirt, and that Orden can't be a replacement for his father. Speaking for myself, and forgive me if I repeat anything I said earlier, but I feel like taking that first step and starting something new can be very difficult, and I've definitely had times where I've just wanted to lie around and feel sorry for myself. I've had times, especially when I was a teenager, when I just lazed around, felt sorry for myself, and just wallowed in depression. I would make excuses for why I didn't want to do things, even small things I otherwise would have loved, like playing video games, for example. As such, I can really relate to Sign here. He says that he stayed at home for his brother's sake, but the reality is he just lost a certain light in his eyes, if you will. And this is something I can relate to as well. As you grow up, it's natural to mellow out a bit and want to live the quiet life. But the problem is with this that you'll quickly find yourself getting bored and feeling like something is missing. This is something Frieren knows all too well. She preferred to live by herself until she was approached by Himmel and Heiter, which basically forced her to step out of her comfort zone. She got to meet new people, experience new things, and ended up gaining a new appreciation for life. She sees Sign as someone who is stuck in the same rut she was once in, and that's why she resolved to help him. Given her age, Frieren has to come to terms with how the world has changed in what to her feels like a very short period of time. The first and probably most obvious example of this is with the hero's party. As I mentioned, Frieren leaves after the journey concludes and travels for 50 years. When Frieren returns to the village to take the party to see the meteor shower, she remarks that the village has barely changed since she was last there, but then she meets her former party members. They've all aged to some extent, but it's most obvious with Himmel. The once youthful and handsome hero is now a mature, bald old man. As promised, Frieren takes the party to see the meteor shower, but naturally the party have all slowed down. This can be applied to many of the other villages that Frieren later visits with Stark and Fern when they go back over the 10-year journey. For example, Frieren recognises this old man as the kid who messed with her skirt 50 years prior. It isn't just Frieren that has to deal with the changing state of the world, however, and we see this from a fairly early stage. Frieren and Fern revisit the village where Frieren sealed away Qual during her journey with the hero's party. The seal is almost broken, and now it's time to face Qual yet again. A lot has changed in the time that Qual was sealed away, however. Spells that were brutal 100 years ago are now just considered ordinary offensive magic. As someone in my late 20s, I can actually relate to this whole thing of leading to learn new things and adjusting to changes in the world. I don't consider myself to be old or out of touch or anything like that, but I'm definitely not a kid anymore. To put a more positive spin on this, growing up is a chance to relearn things, to be curious about life, and to truly become your own person and form your own personality and views on the world. This is something that Frieren learns, and so she starts to appreciate life more. Learning about the world also means coming to terms with how it's changing. While we do see Frieren struggle sometimes, she is content overall and is aware of where the world of magic is going. She understands that the era of elves is in the past, as the species will eventually die out. Frieren is also aware of the potential that magic has, whereas Ciri, who previously served as one of the great mages, was used to magic only being used for combat. Frieren and others of her generation, such as her former party members and now human mages such as Fern, have a genuine desire for peace, and that is what sets them apart. I have read ahead a good bit in the manga, but I won't spoil anything. Instead, I'll just discuss where the anime ends. After the first class mage exam, Duncan opens up with others about his dead wife. As we learned back in episode 21, Duncan explains that, despite having it all, he feels trapped. And the reason he wants to become a first class mage is so that he can return to his village in the Northern Plateau. He's haunted by his past. Weirbill has a more positive view of the past. He finds pleasure in helping people with miscellaneous tasks, been inspired by Himmel. In a sense, he's carrying those memes, and I mean that in the dictionary definition of the word, into a new generation. From Frieren's point of view, time is almost frozen, and so she gets an objective view on the passage of time. As Frieren mentioned earlier, elves are dying out because of their apathy when it comes to reproducing, and so elves are being left behind. There was a time when most of the mages were elves, but now a new age is forming, an era of humans. During the last exam in the penultimate episode, Ciri fails Frieren because she doesn't have an interest in combat magic. She does see potential in Fern, however, so Ciri gives her a pass and offers her the opportunity to become her apprentice, which Fern declines. After all, the mages of this era wish for peace. In a flashback in an earlier episode, Flam tells Ciri that neither of them would be able to defeat the Demon King because neither of them can truly imagine themselves living in an era of peace. Frieren and the younger generation as a whole are different. It was Frieren's spell to create a bed of flowers that inspired Himmel to become a hero after all, and as such, as a new era of magic approaches, Frieren and the crew continue their journey to end.